My name's Jay Brandt. I'm with DF Brandt, Kirkville, New York. We're the representatives for Nortec Humidity, and we've provided the Nortec gas-fired humidifiers here on site. I want to go over the design and features and maintenance of the unit today. There's actually 4 units on site. This unit we're using as an example is identical to the other 3 on site, so everything will be the same from one to the other. The unit is a Nortec Gstc 500. That's a gas-fired humidifier with a total controller. 500 is the actual capacity of the unit, 500 pounds per hour of steam generation at full output. The unit is gas-fired, uses 5 independent gas burners and 1 water tank. The system is being controlled by the Siemens control system. One of the items you'll notice is the enable relay on the top right corner of the unit. That is a signal that the Siemens system has brought the unit on for demand, and then it provides a modulating signal which varies the output of the humidifier. I'm going to take a few moments to take the panel off and show you what the inside of the unit looks like. I'll be right back. With the front panel removed, you get a little better idea of what is inside the unit. I'd like to point out that I do have the unit powered at this point. I will be careful, but during normal maintenance, when you're going to remove the front panel, you should disconnect power from the device to prevent injury. There is a disconnect switch located on the lower right corner on each unit to disable power to the unit. In the view, you'll notice that we have a fairly busy looking electronic section. It consists of the driver boards for the humidifier over on this side, and then you have a series of 5 Fenwal hot surface igniter controls. Very familiar, nothing special there. They control the 5 burners that are in use on the humidifier. Our display panel, which was visible with the front panel on through the cutout, gives you an indication through an LCD window of the operation of the unit. Taking a closer look at the front panel, you'll see that we have an LCD display screen. We have 4 soft buttons located below the screen, some indicating lights, a drain button, and the power on-off button. With the unit in the standby mode, you'll see the request is at 0. That is an indication of what the demand signal from the Siemens control signal is to this particular humidifier. There's a little bit of descriptive information below that, and then a list of bars which identify the soft keys. The soft keys do change function with different screens, so you have to refer to those labels to determine what the button will do at that instant. The indicator lights that we have available are pretty simple. There's an on light, a service light, and a fault light. The on light is blinking green right now because there is no demand on the humidifier, so it's in idle mode. If it were to be enabled, the green light would go on solid. In the event of a service timeout or routine maintenance, the service light will illuminate, but the green light would still be on or off depending on operation. The unit continues. With a fault, we'll get a red fault light, and the humidifier will be put into an idle mode and shut down until service is performed. There's a soft drain button that performs a programmed drain of the humidifier tank. When you need to empty the tank for maintenance or long-term storage, press the button. You'll be prompted that that's going to take the unit out of service. You have to okay that, and then the unit will proceed to pump down the tank and go into an idle state. There's also the power button at the bottom, on-off power, not to be confused with the safety disconnect I mentioned earlier, which is on the outside of the machine on the leg stand. Now we've moved just to the left of the control panel, and you'll notice with behind the front panel there is a level controller. That is where our fill water, part of our fill water, enters the humidifier. There's a 2-level float system, redundant floats. They are constantly monitored and compared to each other. There's also 3 lights. We show 2 of them lit in this view. The 3 lights are red, green, yellow. The 3 lights are actually interpreted as 5 different water levels. So red is the bottom level, red and green is a level, green, green and yellow, and yellow. The humidifier constantly monitors the water level and performs water maintenance to bring the water within the preferred operating level of the tank. The fill system brings water, introduces it to the top of the float chamber, and then that water leaves the bottom of the float chamber and enters into the tank. This helps flush any scale that might backflow into the level controller, keeping them relatively clean through an extended period of operation. If the unit detects that the 2 levels are not consistent, or if they jump through a non-continuous level, it will alert with a fault and indicate that the fault system needs to be examined. Right below the fault or the fill system, there is another manual switch which is labeled as a manual drain. I just want to point this out because this particular switch simply puts 24 volts to the drain pump and pumps the tank down. The humidifier is basically unaware of what's going on when that's done. It's just a handy way to bring the pump on. The software drain on the front panel that we mentioned earlier is the preferred way to drain the water out of the humidifier. In a complete failure of the fill and drain system, there is an auxiliary manual drain located on the rear left side of the unit, which we'll show later, which can be opened to allow drain from the tank so you don't have to have a watery mess if you have to pull parts apart. In our view of the front of the humidifier, the left-hand side is comprised of the stainless steel water tank. This is where the water is boiled and the steam is generated for the output. The burners are located on the right-hand side. They side enter the tank. We'll see that shortly. In order to access the tank for its periodic cleaning, you remove this panel on the front. The bolts around the perimeter are loosened and removed. The panel is taken off of the front end. There is a large heavy-duty orange gasket, which is typically reusable, can be cleaned and used again. Take that off the humidifier. That will give you access to the heat exchangers within the humidifier. When it's time to remove scale from the humidifier, we recommend that you only use a plastic type scraper, no steel tools. The scale can be scraped down off the sides of the heat exchangers, dropped to the bottom of the tank, and then a plastic scoop can be used to remove that accumulated scale from the bottom of the humidifier. Once most of the scale has been removed, you can then open up the manual drain valve on the side of the tank, and using a hose or using buckets or containers, you can introduce water into the bottom of the tank to flush out any loose remaining scale through the auxiliary drain. For cleaning convenience, and given that this unit is a 500-pound unit and it actually has 5 heat exchangers behind each other, there's an additional clean-out panel on the top of the humidifier. You remove the outside cover on the top, and there's a similar panel to this one located on the top that allows you to get overhead access to all 5 heat exchangers for cleaning purposes. As far as controls and communication, these units accept an on-off enable system or signal, and they also take a demand signal for the amount of output of the humidifier. However, they've also been provided with a backnet interface, which you see in this shot. The intelligent board has an RJ45 connection for it. There's also provision to then further link to the other 3 remote humidifiers, and through this one humidifiers backnet you can actually interrogate and investigate all 3 of the other humidifiers. Below or behind this panel, which this is mounted on, there's the original factory terminal strip that has the low voltage connections on it. There's a Phillips head screw on the left side of this panel. If that's removed, this panel will swing out of the way, allowing access to the typical low voltage terminal strip. Moving just below the communications area, again we'll see the Fenwall hot surface igniter controls. These are a typical gas burner control device. They do have the red LEDs on them that you're familiar with probably from troubleshooting gas devices. There are some troubleshooting that can be done from the number of flashes on those lights. However, the humidifier's intelligent control is actually monitoring that also and converting that into an English language fault on the display panel. These are independent, redundant controls. There are 5 burners, as I've mentioned previously. There are 5 hot surface igniter controllers. Each burner has its own hot surface igniter and flame detect, and each burner can be enabled or disabled as needed. The system will drop out a non-functioning burner and continue to run with the remaining good burners if that should occur. Moving around to the right-hand side of the unit, we get access to the gas burners and related control devices. This panel was removed so we could see it, but I'd just like to point out there's a couple of screws at the top of the panel, and then the panel engages a channel at the bottom. So to remove the panel, once the screws have been removed, you need to lift that panel about 1/4 to 1/2 inch to get it out of this trap, and then it will pull off of the unit easily. It can be a little bear to wrestle with sometimes. In here it looks a little busy, but there's actually a lot of repetition going on. Nortec Gstc humidifiers are built on a modular design. They can go from 100 to 600 pounds per hour. This being a 500 pound per hour unit, looking in this cabinet, we see that we've got 5 burners. The burners are identical and actually can be removed individually. There are 4 bolts which hold the burner panel to the heat exchanger. You remove wire connections, combustion air inlet, gas flex, and then the 4 bolts, and that burner assembly will actually slide right out of the humidifier for maintenance or service. The heat exchanger itself is also modular, however that is in 2 burners, and 1 burner. So if you need to replace a heat exchanger, it's not the entire tank assembly that's getting replaced. Zooming in a little bit on what's going on here, you'll notice that each burner has its own air-proofing switch, has its own gas burner. We have inlet air to each burner individually off of a common combustion air manifold at the top. We also have a common gas manifold at the top, distributing gas to the burners. We'll get a little closer look in a few minutes. But looking to the far right in this, you can also see a couple other devices that are important. Fill water is brought in on the upper right-hand view of this shot. We've got a dual fill valve back here. That's a 24 volt solenoid fill valve. When it's enabled, it directs water into the tank through the fill tank and to that level controller we talked about earlier to keep the level controller clean and at an equilibrium with the tank. Down inside we also get a little shot of the electric drain pump. The drain pump is conveniently located. It's actually quite easy to remove if repair should be necessary. There's another item which we also have access to here too, and that is the manual drain that we referenced earlier. This ball valve is going to be in the closed position for normal operation. Opening that ball valve allows gravity draining of the tank in case there should be an issue with the fill pump, or you just want to drain the unit without having to power it up. We'll give you a little close-up view of a typical burner assembly here, just to point out a few things. The burner assembly, we have combustion air coming into the top of the gas valve assembly. We have gas on a flex coming to the other side. We do have an air-proofing switch mounted on the back side. This is actually just a placeholder, so the terminal is not naked and it's not actually a missing wire. Looking further back towards the tank, you can see where the burner mounts into the heat exchanger. There is a hot surface igniter and a flame sensor. Those are actually serviceable as they are in place, although it's a little bit tricky, or the entire burner assembly plate can be loosened and this burner can be pulled physically out of the unit, leaving the 2 adjacent burners in place and undisturbed. Now that you're familiar with the physical layout of the unit, I'll just give you a few reminders on the preventative maintenance for the unit. These units are operating on softened water. That'll reduce some of the amount of minerals being brought into the units. As far as longevity of the unit, the important maintenance item is tank cleaning. We discussed how you can get access to the tank through the front panel and the top panel on the heat exchanger. That should be done at least seasonally. If your water conditions indicate otherwise, it can be done more often. As far as for reliability, day to day, there is a hot surface igniter and flame sensor kit. Those should be replaced once a year, typically the same time you're doing that tank cleaning. That will give you a better long life and you'll have less chance of having an igniter failure at some point during the humidification season. Another item to keep in mind, the units by default, if left without a demand on them for 3 days, will drain the tank down to prevent stagnation of the water. They do recover automatically from that when a demand is placed on them. However, if you know you're going to take the humidifier out of service for more than a few days, you can go ahead and use either the drain or manual drain to empty the tank of water and then shut the unit off, turning off gas and water to the unit until it's needed again. If you have any questions, you're always welcome to call our office, DF Brandt, at 315-656-3884, or you can call Nortec at 1-800-NORTEC-1. They have a great team of technical specialists who will be happy to answer your questions.